Hey guys, today we're going to study the concept of feudalism. Feudalism is a governmental form that's going to form in Japan and in Europe about the same time in history, despite being 1,000 miles apart in geography. You're going to focus today on why feudalism was necessary in Japan, and by the end of this reading, you're going to be able to explain how feudalism benefited people and how it also hurt people. You're also going to look at the hierarchy of the Japanese feudal system and consider who has the power, who does not have power, and what their roles are in this feudal system. This few days, we're going to focus on Japan's system and then we're going to move to Europe's system. So if it makes comparisons through the text, because we are going to get to Europe next. So I'm going to read this text with you. I'm going to highlight as I go. And I want you, when you're watching, I want you to be highlighting on your text on your desk on paper at the same time. When I ask you to consider a paragraph and write a little comment off to the side, you're going to do it kind of like I do it. So this is called Feudalism in Japan. 1,000 miles apart, we have two societies with vastly, this word vastly means large. So you want to highlight that word. That's an important vocabulary word. They have vastly different customs and cultures. So what's going to be in Japan is going to be completely different than the way their culture is in Europe, despite having the same political system called feudalism. Feudalism, here's the definition, was a form of government in which people exchanged land for protection. Go ahead and highlight that line. So you're getting land for protection. So, as a good reader, my question would be, why would they need protection? Protection from what? Protection from whom? So, because you're on a paper copy, you can write a note off here to the margin. Because I'm on my computer, I'm going to type a comment and I'm going to write, I wonder who they need protection from. So I'm going to ask a question because that's what good readers do. I may also make a prediction. Maybe the barbarians from ancient Rome falling are spreading throughout the world. So I'm trying here to ask a question as well as make a prediction or a connection to something I already learned. So I'm going to click the comment box. I want you to take a minute right now and I want you to write. Either you can use mine as an example or you can write something in the margin that made you think of. So I'm going to take a second and I want you to think about this. Now remember, ancient Rome is in Europe and it's about 1,000 miles west of Japan. So I'm not sure the barbarians would reach that far, the ones that were invading Rome and making it fall, but there could be other types of forces that are similar in this part of the world. All right, let's continue. This type of government developed because of their need for protection and loyalty. So again, I wonder what they need protection from and loyalty to. Who are they getting loyalty from or who's giving the loyalty? Europe would fall into chaos. This word right here is pronounced chaos. It doesn't look like it sounds, but we should know that chaos means a whole bunch of mess. Everything's falling apart. So after the fall of the Roman Empire, there's going to be the need of some kind of system that's going to provide protection from the barbarian invasions. Japan is going to have a similar problem because their country is going to fall into a civil war after a series of weak emperors. So go ahead and highlight those two sections plus the word chaos. Now, over here, if you wanted to take a brief minute and Google what vastly means, you could do that. But I told you vast means large. And this word right here, chaos means like disarray. Everything's a mess. So the question here says, what political system did both Japan and Europe have in common? So you need to take a minute and think about that. Remember, it's probably in bold. That's why we use text features to help us read better. take a minute and answer that question. All right. Question number 2 says, why did this type of political system develop in two different places so far apart? Again, this last line right here, Europe would fall into chaos after the fall of the Roman Empire, and Japan would fall into a civil war after weak emperors. That would be where you need to look for question number 2. So both parts of these places are going to be in trouble. And the constant invasions are going to be why they need a system that gives protection to people and to the people of power. So go ahead and answer question number 2. So the big takeaway here is that two different places in the world at this almost the same time in history are going to struggle with constant invasions, and they're going to need protection. So their governments are going to set up this new system called feudalism. So let's talk about one of the reasons Japan needs this system. So we're talking about Japan's geography. Look over here at this map. You can see Japan right here is a series of islands. When we have a whole bunch of islands, we call this an archipelago. An archipelago is all these islands. Japan has over 1,000 little islands surrounding it. It is off the coast of Korea and off the coast of China. So the Sea of Japan is right here and the Pacific Ocean is out here. Notice that Japan has lots of mountains on these small islands. So it again, like Greece, you should notice it's going to be hard to grow crops because it is mountainous. Also, they don't have a lot of land that is flat for farming. So consider the connection between what you learned about Greece's geography to this geography. Also, notice that they're surrounded by an ocean. So you should be making some connections to what you learned about being surrounded by water and how that can actually protect you because you can see who's invading. All right, so let's start back here. Much of Japan's history has been shaped by its geography. Japan is naturally isolated. Remember, when we're an island, we're isolated from people around us because we have to travel by boat. This is because it is an archipelago. Remember, we just talked about an archipelago is a collection of islands. So notice how right after the bold word, it gave you the definition. That is a way to use context clues. In fact, Japan is made up of more than 4,000 islands. I said 1,000, but I forgot it's 4,000. So 4,000 little tiny islands around the bigger islands. Since Japan is small, made up of many islands, the actual land is limited. So we just thought about that because we made that comparison to ancient Greece. And because we don't have a lot of land, we should be making predictions. There's going to be difficult to farm. So over here, I'm going to write a comment and I'm going to put, I predict they will need land to farm because it is so small. So you can write a little comment out here about what you predict. Most of the land is also extremely mountainous. So just like Greece, lots of mountains make it difficult to grow crops, or you can only grow specific crops that are hanging. And it is not arable. Okay, that's a new vocabulary word, so we want to highlight it. And if you remember, look right after it, and it's going to tell you what it means. Good for growing food. So it is not arable. So it is not good for growing food. So go ahead and highlight that. Only about 20% of the land in Japan is suitable for farming. That's not a very good percentage. 20%. So let's make a prediction here. If they can only grow land on 20%, grow farming on 20% of their land, how are they going to get food? I want you to stop right here. And in the margin, I want you to make a prediction. How are they going to get food if only 20% of their land is good for farming? So I predict they will get the following food supply. What's your guess? I'm not going to do it for you. I want you to think about it. Put it out in the margin. All right, look right here. For this reason, the Japanese depend heavily on rice. Rice. And those of you who know when you eat sushi, you know that a lot of Japanese food uses rice in their recipes because you can grow rice in water. So in the low-lying water, rice can be grown. They're also going to depend on the sea for their food. And from the sea, if you guys who predicted that they were going to use seafood or fish, good job. Since farmland was so limited in Japan, it was extremely valuable. So right here, you should be making a prediction. Anything that's valuable, people want. The more land a clan had, the more powerful they were. So what do you predict a clan is? They haven't defined this word clan. What do you think this word means? Clan. What is a clan? Some of you might be guessing that it is a group. Some of you might be guessing that it is a family. Some of you might be guessing that it is some kind of government. But let's read on and find out. Since the ownership of land was so important, clans would often go to war and fight each other over land. So there's going to be a lot of battle over land. So now we're getting back to that. Why did they need protection? They're fighting over the available land in Japan. The constant fighting between clans for control of land threw Japan into a constant state of chaos and many civil wars. So there's our answer. They are going to fight over land. Eventually, military leaders used force to put an end to the civil wars and took control. These military leaders were known as shoguns. I bet these people are going to be important on the hierarchy. You know, our triangles that we learned about in all our civilizations? I want you to predict right here, what do you think shoguns, what kind of power are these guys going to have? We know they're military leaders. Where are they going to be on the social hierarchy? I think shoguns will be where? Finish the sentence. I think shoguns will be at the top of the pyramid, second in charge. Whereabouts do you think they're going to be since they're military leaders? Over time, the rule of these shoguns slowly faded away, and the land was broken up into separate kingdoms. This marked the beginning of feudalism in Japan. So now we're going to have separate kingdoms. These kingdoms are going to become a feudal location, and you need to know what that means. So let's make sure you highlighted all of that, and I want you to answer these two questions. Remember, go back in the text because the answer's in the text. Explain how Japan, being an archipelago, affected their culture. So, what are they getting from this archipelago? Food wise, protection wise, invasion wise, travel wise? How is being this series of islands right here going to affect the culture? Remember, culture just means your lifestyle. Okay, so you should have an answer for this one, and you should be writing the answer to the second one here. The second one says, what was so limited and valuable in Japan that control of it caused many conflicts between clans? And that's pretty simple because what have we been talking about? And make sure you mention the number. What percentage? All right, we're going to move down to this section here now. If you need more time, just pause this video and then you can press play. So if you look down below, you can already see the hierarchy, the triangle hierarchy that we learned about in all the ancient civilizations. And remember, they all had somebody on top and they had somebody on the bottom, and somewhere in between were different groups of people who in some civilizations could move up and down, in some could never move up and down. So we're going to focus on Japan now, the feudal system. What does it mean to talk about feudalism? So, feudalism was basically a form of government in which people exchanged land for protection. Highlight that again. We know that they need protection because people are fighting over land. So, not many people are going to have land. So, but you need land to live. So, certain groups are going to give up some land to people who are going to protect them from invasion. So within the independent kingdoms of Japan, there were different positions. Each position was loyal to the position above them and offered them a service for the kingdom. This is called a social hierarchy. Everybody highlight that sentence right there. So let's look at our hierarchy down below, and we can quickly see that there's an emperor on top. In Japan, though, it says he was at the top of Japanese society, but he had little real power. We call that a figurehead. Somebody who's kind of at the top, but they don't really run the show. So make sure you realize that. So there's an emperor, but he was basically a figurehead. That means somebody with not real power, but just seems like they have power. That's kind of how it is in Great Britain today. They have a king, the king sits on top, but the king doesn't really have power because they have a parliamentary government who makes the rules, who makes the laws, who enforces them. The king just kind of is there because he's always been there. All right, look at who's next. Who's next is going to be the shogun. The shogun is the actual ruler of Japan. And then on the same level with the shogun is the daimyo. And these were the wealthy landowners. So we know in every civilization, the wealthy people are on top. And in this case, the shogun. Because I'm guessing the shogun might have to remember, we learned above that a shogun is a military leader. So don't forget that. Because he had control over the military. So he's the one who's going to have the power, the real power. A daimyo, or a military lord, ruled the lands as the independent kingdoms, but they were loyal to the emperor and the shogun. So the thing to know in Japanese society is that each level is loyal directly to the people above them, and each one is loyal to the one above them. So it's a system of loyalty moving from bottom to top. In order to protect their kingdoms, the daimyo hired samurai warriors. So you've probably heard of samurai before. The samurai warriors are going to practice a code that's called Bushido. This is going to be how they are going to protect their kingdoms. So the daimyo are going to hire samurai warriors to protect them from any other invaders. In return, the samurai are going to receive land. The samurai warriors were each given their own portion of land in exchange for protection. You all probably predicted that before I said it. The samurai warriors are going to be busy fighting to defend the land, and then the peasants were used to farm the land. So peasants is going to be the largest class of people. These are going to be the artisans, the craftspeople, the farmers, the people who are going to be making stuff. Okay. Remember, in Asian society, they value people who create or make. They don't value people who do the selling, the buying and the selling. That's why merchants are on the bottom. They think you didn't actually create anything. You're just buying and selling. Now, that's important to the economy, but they don't value it because they don't think it's an actual skill. So the peasants are going to be the farmers, and at the bottom are going to be the merchants. Now, in feudalism, peasants sometimes are stuck on the land. They live there forever and they don't really have opportunities to move off the land that they work for because there's nowhere else to go. All right. Although feudalism offered more security and protection for people, kingdoms were constantly going to war with each other trying to get more land. Despite the constant fighting, Japan's economy will grow under this system. So, we're going to answer these two questions based on what we read up here. The Emperor of Japan was a figurehead. What is a figurehead? Go back, find the word figurehead, and look at what it says. All right. And the last question, what item did the daimyo give the samurai in exchange for protecting the daimyo's kingdom? That you should remember because the whole thing in Japan is about the lack of land. All right. When you're finished this, I would like you in this box right here at the bottom of your page to kind of tell me in one sentence. I want you to summarize the key takeaway. What is it you need to be able to explain to somebody else? What are you responsible for learning? If you were going to teach somebody else about feudalism in Japan, what would you have to tell them? I want you to write a summary right here. It could be one sentence, two sentence. What do you think you would need to tell somebody if you were teaching this? Right, I want you to write that response to that at the very bottom of the page. All right, take a few minutes and do that, and you are done the annotation section of your station rotation.